Welcome to the Word for 2021. Today we're in Deuteronomy chapter 16. As you read this chapter, you will find that there are 3 times that the Lord is telling the men to assemble together before Him and before the sanctuary. Those times were the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread or the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. Each of these times were where they were to remember all that God had done for them. They were illustrations for the people. It was a time to celebrate God's provision, His protection, and how God had been with them through very difficult times. First, it was the Passover. This was a time where they were to remember their deliverance. God had done everything for them as He brought them out of slavery. Then there was the Feast of Weeks. This was a time where they could participate in thanking God for all that He had done. They were to give an offering to the Lord in proportion to the blessings that He had given. So, Passover was a time remembering God's pardon. Then, the Feast of Weeks was a time of participation with the Lord. And then you had the Feast of Tabernacles. This was a time where they celebrated God's provision. God had blessed them, been with them, and provided for them all the time that they were in the wilderness. So, the people were to set up a shelter. They were to remember their time in the wilderness. Israelites still do this today. They set up tents or shelters and they remember how God had provided in the time of the wilderness. Now in verses 16 and 17 we read that no man should appear empty-handed before the Lord. Everyone must bring a gift in proportion to the way that the Lord your God has blessed you. As they came before the Lord, they needed to prepare. They needed to spend time thinking. They needed to spend time recounting and calculating how God had blessed them. God wanted them again to celebrate, and so He wanted them to be full of joy. The key to that was to prepare. If they thought, then they would thank. The same is true for us. If we think about all that God has done, then we will be thankful. Now let me turn this to today. When you and I go to church, we want to see God's hand move. We want to experience His blessing. We want to know that God is at work in our midst. In order to have that happen, we need to spend time preparing. First, we need to be praying. We need to pray that God would give us an open heart, an open ears to hear, that God would give us an attitude of gratitude, and we would have an attitude of expectation. We're praying, preparing our hearts to receive something from the Lord when we come into His presence. But then we also need to be prepared in order to give. We need to give for what God has first given to us. Now, as a pastor for many, many years, I've had people say, well, I give of my time and my talents. What they're saying is, well, I'll show up and I'll do stuff. But the problem is, that's not what God is calling us to do. He wants us to give of the sustenance that we have. We need to give Him our first fruits as a thank offering to Him. Jesus even said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So our heart will follow our treasure. What we give to, that's what we're most interested in, and that's where our hearts will be aligned. David even said that when he went to worship the Lord, he would not give something that cost him nothing. Worship is all about sacrifice, and our hearts are connected to our wallets, unfortunately. Again, I've been a pastor for many, many years, and I've seen this play out time and time again. People that give nothing to God, they really do miss out on spiritual blessings. They miss out on spiritual growth. They're also easily distracted by the world, and they become easily offended, and they easily fall away. When we give, our hearts follow. Now, if we want joy, and we want to experience God and His blessings, there are 4 things that we need to do. We need to stay connected to Him. We need to stay connected to each other, God's family. We need to obey God's word, but then we also need to be a giver. Thank you for joining the Word for 2021.